Welcome back to High on History.
And tonight, we've got a special thing for you.
I'm Liz.
I'm Jordan.
And this is our Halloween special.
So, I'm going to start off the evening with a ghost tale. La Dame Vertu du Château du Brissac. In other words, the Green Lady of the Château de Brissac. Friends, gather around. Forget the typical rattling of chains and the haunting whispers of ghost stories we are familiar with. Tonight, we speak of the haunting born from passion and spilled blood. Charlotte de Braise never left the stone walls when her life came to a blood-stained, brutal, and sudden end. She was born to the King of France, Charles VII, and her mother was his main mistress. Agnes Sonreal, Dame de Butte. Charlotte lived a privileged life in the courts, and she grew into an intelligent and charming beauty. At 16, in 1462, her father, the king, arranged her marriage to a powerful and well-connected, yet considerably older husband, Lord Jacques de Braise, Seneschal of Normandy. Now imagine 16-year-old young Charlotte entering the stunning holdings of Lord Braise after living a lavish life of court. It's not the ruins that we're familiar with now, but a beautiful castle that would one day become her prison. Lord Jacques was a stern man of his time, focused on his duties to the king and the expectation of heirs. She produced and bore him children, but often he was away, leaving her to roam the empty halls of Château de Brissac. Charlotte's isolation manifested in a yearning for passion as she tended to her duties with her ladies-in-waiting. And in the lonely halls, there was a charming and irresistible, he was the rugged huntsman, named Pierre de Laverne. Their romance was a consuming entanglement, violating the very social structure that defined their existence. Whispers from the servants eventually reached the ears of her husband of their affair. In denial because of who she was, the nobility, the beautiful family that she came from. He denied it, but he could not escape the madness, and it consumed him. And one day, late on the 31st of May in 1477, his rage erupts. The household was sleeping. He drew his sword, and what happens next was nothing but swift and brutal. Jacques storms into the private chambers where the lovers slept, and he plunged his cold steel blade into his wife and Pierre. There were no pleas, no cries. Jacques' blows were final, desperate, and merciless. Charlotte lost her life, not by the plague that roamed the planet, nor of natural childbirth, but at the hands of her husband. And entangled in their passion was her love Pierre, whose only crime was loving Charlotte. Jacques de Braise did not conceal his violent crime. Yet in medieval France, murdering of your unfaithful wife was considered a justifiable act of honor. He was punished for killing the now half-sister of the king, Louis XI. Imprisoned, his lands confiscated, Jacques eventually was pardoned, his lands and rights restored. It was nothing but a large symbolic warning to other nobles. Don't kill the royal blood. Jacques lived out his days, marked by his deeds. And what of poor Charlotte? She was buried with a ceremony less than what her royal lineage deserved. Her memory haunted the halls with the whispers of guilt and injustice. No spectral shadow passes through the stone walls, but a forever linger of sadness, profound cold spots on hot summer days, ethereal floral perfume, or an earthy, mossy aroma are said to float into the senses. Woven into the empty halls is an abundance of echoes, sighs of sadness and cries of grief, sometimes an unnatural silence absorbing all vibrations, adding to the profound, unsettled loneliness felt by poor Charlotte. A vibrant life cut short, her spirit is of a woman who tried to love and lost everything. A constant reminder and a story that refuses to never be lost. True hauntings are tragedies that refuse to be forgotten. Dun, dun, dun. And that was the tale of the Green Lady.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I, too, have a dark tale. And mine is one you may be at least somewhat familiar with. Because
I'm very familiar with.
she has a unique epitaph. They called her the Blood Countess. Elizabeth Bathory. So, we all know the tale. She bathed in the blood of virgins to stay young forever. She's something of a vampire. She lures women into her home, tortures them, and murders them. It is claimed at least 630 women were murdered at her hand. But that is not the darkest part of this tale. So a little bit about Elizabeth Bathory. She was cousin to which king? Let me check here. Oh, yes. She was cousin to the King of Transylvania.
Oh.
Indeed. And she was married to the Count Ferenc Nadadzi. Now, she was quite rich herself. She came from a very long, very noble lineage. And then she married into even more wealth. Her husband, away on battle most of the time. She is left to manage the estates, and they are considerable. She has multiple estates. She lives in Castle, I really have a hard time pronouncing this, but it's Kajivtsi or something like that. And her husband is off fighting the Ottoman Turks, so she runs everything. And everybody notices right away she is capable, intelligent, strong. She does run what's called a gynoecium, which is not so much a finishing school, but yes, she invited young noble ladies, usually lesser nobles, to learn etiquette and sewing and embroidery and stuff.
Yeah.
So there were women in the house. Eventually, her husband dies, and she is left the sole heir of all the holdings. Now, that was not so bad, but what was bad was that she was so wealthy that the king of the Habsburg king Matthias II had to borrow money from her.
Ooh.
And in fact, he borrowed such a sum from her that if he had had to pay it back, it would have completely bankrupted Austria? Was it Austria? He's king somewhere.
Oh boy.
Anyway. Now, enter Count... I don't speak Hungarian or Romanian or whatever these names are. Enter Count Georgi Thurzo. Now, he's the king's right-hand man. He's the Palatine of Hungary. And that basically amounts to judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to matters of the nobility.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't you know it, he was the one who would stand to gain if Lady Bathory fell.
Ooh, go figure.
So what happens next is yet another case of death by pamphlet and rumor.
Ooh.
So rumors start going around that women are disappearing and being tortured and dying. And, in fact, a couple of women did die, and Lady Bathory claimed that cholera killed them. But the public was not convinced. And so these rumors stir further and further and further, and eventually Thurzo orders an investigation. And she and several of her servants are seized at Castle Siege, and her servants are tortured until they confess.
Oh boy.
And they confess. First 50, then 60, then 100, and more as they are tortured. Although some of them did recount. It didn't matter, though. Her servants were executed. However, Erzabat was never put on trial. You see, trials come with nitpicky things like requiring evidence, defense, witnesses, people who could speak for her. So instead, Count Thurzo locked her in her rooms in her own castle, boarded up the doors, leaving only a slit for food and drink. She died, fully dressed, lying face down on her bed, 4 years later, having never gone to trial. And the rumors of her terrible misdeeds were not even started in her own time, but in fact over 100 years later by a Christian monk.
What?
However, not a single body was ever found. No girls were reported missing. There were no graves. Nothing.
No one came looking for missing girls?
No one came looking for missing women. It simply didn't happen. What happened was King Matthias did not have to pay back a loan that would have bankrupted him.
Oh.
Thurzo inherited all of her lands.
Oh.
And a intelligent, powerful, wealthy woman
was taken out of power.
Was taken out of power and then demonized literally for hundreds of years.
That's messed up.
That is a horror story.
That is a horror story. Wow. Wow. Like, I knew it was bad, but I didn't actually, like, dang.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, she probably didn't kill anybody.
Uh,
And I'm guessing that's the reason she never went to trial.
Probably. They wouldn't have the evidence on her. No bodies, no one claiming missing girls. That would be the biggest one. People come looking.
Mm-hmm.
Nobility?
Of course.
With Flip is my daughter.
Of course.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the stories that were made up about her later, the ones by the priest, which are the ones that we are most familiar with, don't match the court records even of, and it was a sham trial of the servants.
Oh, wow.
But his story doesn't even match what the court records say that they said. So
Wow.
it's just, it was a bunch of men who needed to move a very powerful woman out of the way, and the way they did that was to absolutely demonize her for all time. They didn't just take her lands or her money. They took her name, they took her reputation.
Wow.
They destroyed her. They tried to destroy her for all time.
Yeah, they did.
So, yeah.
Well, with that being said then,
So that is our Halloween horror story.
tune in a couple days for our regular Sunday
Our regularly
episode.
scheduled episode, yeah.
2 in 1 week for you guys. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Live long and prosper.